I'm Scott Lowry. I'm the Richard Osborne Professor of Entrepreneurship here at Weatherhead, where I teach entrepreneurship through acquisition. I'm also an ETA entrepreneur and investor, and I am here to introduce our speaker. So this workshop is the Preparing Your Company for Growth workshop. GJ King is next door, just to make sure you're in the right spot. So anyway, let's get right into it. So it's my great pleasure to introduce Jeff. Jeff is the co-founder and CEO of the Ames Institute. He is certified in appreciative inquiry as a practitioner. That's an incredible change management, positive change technology that was actually invented here at Weatherhead about 40 years ago. So if you're not familiar, definitely worth a Google search and a checkout, or you could check out Jeff's site and learn about how he's made that super practical for small businesses. Jeff's also a professor at Western University in Canada, where he teaches leadership and consulting at the graduate level. In addition to leading and scaling 3 different companies, Jeff has over 25 years of senior leadership experience and has worked with companies like Charles Schwab, Nova Chemicals, General Motors, Magna International, Western University, Fathom, Precision Communications, PV Mart, Plex, Bishop Wisecarver, Rockwell Automation, and Beyond Trust. And so if anybody knows me, you may have noticed that several of my companies were on that list because we actually work with Jeff, and I'm such a believer in his technology and approach that I'm actually an investor and on the board of his company, in full disclosure. But he's got good stuff. I hope you're enjoying how he's designed and facilitated the day today. We're kind of experiencing some of the stuff that he brings to these small companies that we've really appreciated and benefited from. And without further ado, I'd like to invite my good friend Jeff up to take it from here.
Thank you, Scott. Hello again, everybody. This is the part where I can go off script versus what we were doing earlier. I'm really excited to be here with you. I want to share a quick personal story because we heard a couple examples earlier about groups, peer groups, right? Peer groups like Visage and other things. Well, last week we run as a kind of a passion project a peer group for business owners that are all dads, right? All specifically dads. That's what they have in common. And so we were running one of our twice annual events in person, and we brought a guest speaker in to do an exercise with them on writing a legacy letter to their kids. And so what I thought was really funny is the speaker at the front goes through and says, okay, there's the introduction, there's the things I believe in you, the things I love about you. It goes through these different categories, and one of the categories was advice that you'd pass along to your kids. And so on break, I ran into one of the members of our group, and this individual's really excited. And he's like, I'm actually writing this letter to my wife. I'm like, wow, that's amazing. And as I get walking back to the room to go in and start talking again, I kind of had, I think, was an epiphany. So when I opened up the session, I said, I just want to honor those that are writing this letter to their wife first. I said, but if I can give you one piece of my own advice is, when you look at those sections, just skip the advice section altogether. Here's what I want to do. I want to open up. We're here today to talk about how do we maximize value? How do we grow our businesses? And there's a wide variety of people in the room today. So I want to connect this to every single person here. I want to reflect on this question, the question that I've got up on the screen there. You see the car, the Model T, Henry Ford, and I want you to think about, in organizations, how has work changed since Henry Ford invented the assembly line? How has work changed? What does work look like today in our organizations versus what it looked like way back in 1913? All right, I want to take about 30 seconds, just write a couple notes down, a couple ideas on how work has changed. How has work changed since the days of 1913 with Henry Ford? Write down 1, 2, maybe 3 ideas, the way work's changed. And Scott, if I can cue you up to be ready with a mic, just in 1 second. Here's what I'd love for you to do. Before I ask for shares to the large room, just turn to your neighbor, share one or two ways work has changed since 1913. Take 2 minutes, share with your neighbor, how has work changed since 1913? All right, if I could have your attention again up here. Thank you for entertaining me going through that exercise. I'd love to hear from 1, 2, 3 people. How has work changed? What are some of the things that you discussed at your table? Just raise your hand up here, Scott. How has work changed since 1913?
We're more of a global scale. I can speak loudly.
Global scale.
Global scale, yeah.
Love it.
So different.
Instead of one individual location, work happens all over the place. Beautiful. Just shout it out. That's probably easier. Less manual labor and more desk-oriented. Yep. More thinking involved in how we interact. Yep.
It being now an employee's market versus always being an employer's market.
Love that. More about the people. Who else? Yep, back here.
Yeah, along those lines, I say from sweatshop to self-actualization.
To self-actualization. Love that. Love that. Anyone else? Yep, right here in the middle.
I just stepped in. I had to take a call, so I shared with my neighbors about digital distractions changing.
Yes. Absolutely. Absolutely. And if anybody in here has kids growing up today, it's like this all of the time, right? The digital world is massively transforming how we work and how our youth are coming into organizations today. Any other ideas? How's work changed since 1913? Anyone else?
Faster pace.
Sorry?
Faster pace.
Much faster pace. Absolutely. Absolutely. Here's what I want you to think about. Think across all of those answers. What's the one answer we didn't hear? What's the one answer we didn't hear is our leadership or management approach. So we do workshops like this with leaders all across the world. And we do a similar exercise. And what's really fascinating is every time we do this exercise, the same thing happens, right? We talk about how our world has dramatically changed, but our management thinking really hasn't. Now, that's not to say our management thinking is wrong. What it's saying is when we think about the way we operate our businesses today, if the world is changing dramatically around us, how do we need to be evolving as well? Let me share a quick story with you. So it's probably about 12, 13 years ago. Actually, it's a little bit longer than that. I found myself running a very large manufacturing company, around 200 million in sales. There's myself and one other individual. And it was just after the 2009 period. So if anyone can remember back 2009, tough times, especially for the manufacturing. It was tough times across all of the industries, but tough time for us. And so what had happened was we had lost some sales. We were struggling year over year. And myself and this other individual, we'd get in a room every July, every August, and we sit down, we rack our brains around what do we need to do next year? What does this organization need to do? What do we need to achieve? And we would come up with what we thought were some amazing goals. We'd spend the next 2 to 3 months trying to convince all of the leaders in our organization that we had figured out the right things for us to work on. Right? And when we finally convinced the leadership team, then we had the difficult process of going out and convincing everybody else in the organization. So by the time January rolled around, we're excited, we're revved up and ready to go, we're convincing people, and every year the same thing happened. People were naturally resistant to the things that we were rolling out. And so even when we did get momentum, it was usually March or April. Remember, we started in July, working on this in August, working on it in September. It'd be March or April before we'd get any kind of momentum going on the goals that we'd identified. And honestly, for about 3 years, we struggled. We didn't grow. Our company was at 200 million in sales, and we stayed at 200 million, But like all of you know, prices don't decrease usually, right? Employee wages kept increasing. So what it really meant was our profits were decreasing. And so finally, we put our heads together and we said, we need a different management system. We need to approach this in a totally different way. We need success. Ultimately, my future at the organization was probably dependent on it. But not just my future, the 600 employees that we had as well. And so we went on this search. We looked at all of the different management systems that were out there. We looked at, we heard from Brennan, EOS. We looked at 4 disciplines of execution. We looked at scaling up. We looked at OKRs. We looked at the balanced scorecard. And what we realized is none of these really fit the application that we're in, but there was good elements in each and every one. And so we pieced together this management system that we were going to use for the upcoming year. It was a combination of all of them. And the important thing is, from a goal perspective, we were using 4 disciplines of execution to really narrow our focus. But something really important happened during that process. Someone in our organization sent me an article. And when they sent me the article, I was instantly intrigued. I was also instantly confused. Because this article was very academic in nature. And so as I was reading through it, I said, this sounds amazing, but I'm not exactly sure how we would go about doing it. But on a whim, and probably on a whim that was based on the desperate situation that I was in, I decided to embrace it. And so that article was about appreciative inquiry. And so what happened is new management systems, strengths from all the other ones, along with appreciative inquiry, we brought a representation of the whole company into our planning process the next year, right? Not the whole company, but a representation. And what happened through there surprised me from the beginning all the way through to the end. The first thing that surprised me was that with everybody in the room, we identified 2 goals that were bigger than I could have ever imagined. $200 million business, profits declining. The first goal we had identified as a company was to win $100 million of new business in the next year. We hadn't grown, remember, for 3 to 4 years before that. The second goal that everybody came together and had energy around was eliminating 5 warehouses. We had all of our inventory stored across 5 warehouses, but we knew that we needed to eliminate those to open up the space for all this new business we were going to win. We left the room, the planning session, and what happened was people instantly started taking action. We didn't have to wait those 4, 5, 6 months of convincing people that these were the right things to do because they had a hand in creating it. And this is where the second surprise came in that was a blessing. All those previous years of not hitting our goals, in that next year we hit both of our goals, bigger goals than we'd ever set before. We won the $100 million of new business in August, and we eliminated all 5 warehouses by September. We actually went on to win $130 million of business that year. Secured a financial future for each of one of those employees and probably saved my own bacon in the process. And that's when I knew there was something to this. That's when I knew I really need to get curious about appreciative inquiry. Now, this morning we heard from Cheryl first, and then Brendan and Andrew. And we heard 3 things. From Cheryl, we heard that you really need management strength in an organization, right? From Brendan, he talked about the need for a management system, an operating system, absolutely. And Andrew talked about the importance of motivating people. Now, as a recovering CPA, as a recovering CPA, those 3 things were very difficult for me to fathom that you could do simultaneously. But that's what we've found with applying appreciative inquiry on a day-to-day basis. So what is appreciative inquiry? Anybody know what appreciative inquiry? Raise your hand if you've heard of it. Yeah, not many, right? I hadn't either as a leader. And so after this happened, I really went on a mission to say, how can we bring this into companies on a day-to-day basis? Appreciative inquiry was born over 35 years ago, right here in Cleveland. Right? It was actually David Cooprider and Ron Fry at Case Western University. They were called into the Cleveland Clinic. All of you know how world-renowned the Cleveland Clinic is today, but the Cleveland Clinic at the time was struggling. They had a whole bunch of leaders and a whole bunch of consultants in the room, and they asked David to come in and help. And as David sat in the room and as he listened to the conversations that were happening, he noticed something. he noticed that all of the conversations were focused on what was wrong, what was missing, and what was broken. And as he watched these conversations, he could see the energy being sapped out of the room. And through his research that he had been working on, he thought, what if instead of focusing on what was wrong, broken, and missing, what if we had conversations about what was right, about what we wanted, and about what was possible? And he started to ask questions that moved the conversation in that direction. Fast forward to today, you all know the success of the Cleveland Clinic. So what is appreciative inquiry in its simplest form? Appreciative inquiry is the search through questions for the best of what was, is, and could be in any human system. And that's what we're really talking about. When we talk about operating systems or management systems, the way we work today, and it was the gentleman over at the table here said it really well, right? We are not assembly lines anymore, we're people, we think, right? Organizations are made up of people, human systems operating each and every day. How do we pull out the best from each of those systems? That drove the question for me is how do we leverage this transformative power of appreciative inquiry, which was largely based on having events? And how do we leverage that each and every day in the conversations that we're having as leaders? So I made some notes here as we were going. I want to ask a question of the folks in the room. How many of you in this room are looking to acquire a company? You don't have a company that you're looking to acquire. Just raise your hand. Got a few folks, okay. How many of you in this room currently own a company or are thinking about an add-on, acquiring more companies? Several people, okay, we've got a large population there. How many of you are running a business and would like to sell it someday? Okay, how many of you own a business and would like to sell it someday? Then everybody's hand should go up, right? That's what this is for, right? That's what AIMS is for. It is a management system, right? Appreciative, AIMS stands for, and I think I have this in the next one. Nope, let me go back. It stands for the Appreciative Inquiry Management System, right? So if you're a current business owner, maybe you're stuck, you're not growing the company. If you've just newly acquired a company and you recognize that you need the systems, the strategy, the structure to grow the company, but you're struggling to get buy-in quickly, or if you're looking to build transferable value, you're looking to hopefully sell your business one day, AIMS can help. Quick survey, scale of 1 to 10, right? How many out of every 10 companies that go up for sale, how many actually sell? How many do you think? 2, 3? Yeah, not many, right? It's actually just below 2 is the actual statistic. So think about that as a business owner or an investor. If you have a company, most of the companies that we go to sell don't sell. Why is that? Right? It's to the points that we heard before. The points that Cheryl talked about, the points that Brandon talked about, the points that Andrew talked about. Right? A lack of system or processes is one of the key reasons. A lack of leadership bench strength, like Cheryl talked about earlier today. And the third, which is probably relatable to each of us, is if you're running a business or if you've ever run a business, is you're in the business firefighting each and every day and not working on the business. Right? One of the questions we posed to the group of business owners I was talking about before, the dads, is if you're firefighting, you need to ask yourself the question as a leader, are you actually a firefighter or you're the arsonist? Right? And I found in my own situation I was the arsonist. Why do I say that? My words didn't align with my actions. Right? So I said, I believe in you. I trust you. Go do this. Right? And then what would happen? As soon as something happened, the person would come back to me and I'd answer their question for them. I'd solve that problem for them. I'd step in. Right? I was still the person making the decisions each and every day. Why? Because I didn't have an approach to do anything differently. I didn't have the right thinking. So when we think about companies and those 3 common challenges that we have, what happens is most of the time we don't sell our business. Or if you do sell your business, you're stuck working in it. You're tied to a contract where you have to be there for 3 or 4 years. If you've just acquired a company and you go in, you're the new CEO, right? A couple things happen. Number one is the previous owner usually has to stay on board. And what happens as you try to move forward, you try to implement the systems, the strategy, the structure, people run to the previous owner. Because the previous owner, just like I think it was Brendan talked about, answers their questions. Right? The previous owner is the person. Cheryl talked about it. There was a phrase at the bottom that said, the risk they look for is, there's a key man, I think, was what she talked about. So how do you go into a company when you don't necessarily have the technical know-how and skill and get people to buy into a system, strategy, or structure? It's by involving them from the get-go. So here's something interesting, right? If we look at the Rockefeller habits, we look at OKRs, we look at traction, we look at 4 disciplines of execution, and we think back to the Model T example from earlier. All of those systems are good, and I've used all of them, and we pull the best from all of them, right? Having discipline in your organization will help you improve, but it'll help you improve on the things that you want. What if you thought about the organization a little bit differently and thought, maybe I don't know what else is possible. If I'm focused on what I want, what is everybody else focused on? What do they want? Right? All of those current management systems are simplified versions of the past, which is good news. They are simplified. They're much easier to use. But the maximum potential you're going to get from that is what you want as the business leader. Right? And there is more that's possible. So here's the thing, at Ames, we agree wholeheartedly that the functions of management still hold true today. Over 100 years later, the functions of management are the same. We have to plan, we have to lead, and we have to operate our organizations, right? Planning, what does that involve? Setting a vision, right? Creating strategies, setting goals. Operating is looking at our quarterly priorities and making sure that we're executing on the things that need to get done, just like Brendan said earlier. Leading, how are we making decisions? How are we enabling other people to make decisions? Those functions are still there, and every management system that's out there will provide those functions. So if you don't have a management system, I encourage you to lean into one. But what hasn't changed, and we heard that from the example earlier, are the management practices. How we go about planning, leading, and operating our businesses. And here's what I'll tell you, in the example that I provided my story and the examples I'm going to share with you in just a minute, it's not really about the what, it's about the how, right? The approach that we take. So I talked about this earlier. Ames is a modern management system built for the modern era, right? That transforms how we go about planning, leading, and operating our business. We use strengths-based approaches like appreciative inquiry, and SOAR, and design thinking, right, to leverage what's possible in any organization. And as we were doing this work several years ago, we sat in the room and talking about, well, what do we want as business leaders? We want more, right? We want to drive results. We want to motivate our people. But we don't necessarily know what else is possible. So in order to adopt a management system that's built for this area, at Ames we talk about 2 fundamental shifts that you need to make. Right? And I wouldn't even say that you need to make, you just need to embrace. Right? 2 shifts that are really important. The first is a shift in perspective, and we heard some examples of that earlier, and the second is the shift in approach. So what do I mean by the shift in perspective? The technology example we heard earlier, right? We still see, in all of the management thinking out there, and if you're like me, you're going to be cursed after I say this, all of the management thinking that's out there today is about the select few convincing all of the other people. It's a top-down hierarchy, right? Hierarchies that actually, if you go back in time, come from the monarch, right? Where you have the king or queen and everybody else underneath it serving them, right? That's how organizations look today. That's what our management thinking tells us we need to do. Make decisions, determine what you want, and communicate it out to your organization. But when we think about how organizations operate today, that's not how we work. We are human systems. Information flows instantly. Between person to person, it's definitely not top-down. Right? We are interconnected sets of relationships, network of networks in our organizations. And so we have to see the organization for what it is. The second is a shift in approach. And so I want to put both of these on a slide for y'all, right? And look at them this way. So over here we have the shift in perspective from top down to interconnected, right? From the select few in the management conversations we're having to the diverse many. We hear a lot of talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion, right? Here's the thing, without inclusion and belonging, you can't really create diversity and equity. We have to create the space where we can welcome people in as individuals in the organization that are adding significant value into our management conversations, right? I talked about before being the arsonist. I said, you know, your input matters. I trust you and I believe you. Yet when we had all those management conversations, none of those individuals were in the room. Now, to take that leap to say, hey, I'm going to bring everybody into this conversation where we're going to do our strategic planning, at the time when you told me to do that, I would be like, you're crazy. That's going to turn into utter chaos. Right? We can't manage this organization by committee, right? It can't be a bottom up. Well, here's the thing with appreciative inquiry, it's not top down or bottom up. It's everybody all at once, right? You need the approach. So what's the approach shift? We're moving from command and control, where we convince other people. We move from the select few over to the right, trying to convince everybody else to buy into the things that we want, towards people in the room, you know, not having the answers or focusing on the problems, but instead looking at what's possible and asking the right questions. Inviting folks into the conversation to inspire them into action because they had a hand in creating what we're focused on. And I really want to lean into this last part here about, you know, shifting from answers to questions. Someone asked the question earlier, I think it was a gentleman over here somewhere, around what advice would you give to MBA students or high school students that might be in the room? Here's the thing that I wish I would have known a long time ago, is that you as the leader, you as the person running the business, you don't have to have all the answers. You need to be able to ask the right questions that move us in the direction that we want to go. And so I want to give you a couple practical examples right now, because this is a workshop that you can take into your organizations. 3 questions that we've found consistently transform the management conversations we're having. The first one is a question that connects us. A question that connects us together. All of you are going to be here this afternoon. You're going to see the exact example of this to start the session. Right? A question that connects us is a question around purpose. Instead of me standing here this afternoon telling you all why I think it's important that you're here, I'm going to give you an opportunity to answer it yourself. Because the answers you're going to come up with are going to be far better than my answer. And the answers that you come up with are going to connect you all to one another. So the next time you're having a conversation, if your tendency is to get up on, you know, the front of a room, or, you know, be the speaker on a Zoom call and convince people why something's important, instead ask them. Let me give you an example. What is it about being here in this room learning about ETA that's important or meaningful to you? What is it about being here in this room learning about ETA that's important or meaningful to your company? What is it about ETA that's important or meaningful to your family, your community, or the world? And when I invite people to answer that question, they can answer it from multiple levels and look for what's common. The next time you have a meeting, start with a purpose question. What is it about blank that's important or meaningful to you, this team, this organization, others? You'll be surprised with the results. The second question that we really lean into, and there's a whole science behind this, is questions that include us, that bring us into a conversation. And those questions are geared around strengths. High point moments from the past, moments of excellence. Here's the thing, people are really creative in how they resist change, right? Right? People are really creative. The reason they resist change is not because they're opposed to change. People change every single day. They resist being told to change. And so the way we bring them from the past into the future is we asked a question about when have we been at our best? What are the things that we value most about what we do as an organization today that no matter what we do in the future, we want to protect? Give people an opportunity to talk about when they've been at their best, the moments of excellence in your organization, individually or collectively, and then when you ask them to look into the future, they're much more likely to go with you. Not only that, there's some science behind it that tells us when we talk about when we've been at our best, it elicits positive emotions, and positive emotions open up our vision. people always say, how do we go into this conversation? People create all these amazing ideas and they've never contributed an idea before. It's because first we took them on the journey to change. We gave them an opportunity to tap into when they've been at their best. What do people want to know in organizations? That they're valued, that their opinion matters, that they're seen, heard, and understood. Give them an opportunity to be seen, heard, and understood. The third question that we love to ask are questions that inspire us. So if we've gone, connected to a shared purpose around why this topic's important, we've dug into our strengths, the things we want to bring into the future, then we ask about where do we most want to go? What is it we'd most like to see? What would success look like 1 year from today? Give people a chance to answer, just like I did in the first exercise. I didn't say, here's the question, let's talk about Model T, who wants to share? Everybody notice what I did? I gave you 20 seconds to journal. I had you share with a neighbor and then I brought it up. It's allowing people to share their ideas and then converge on what's common, right? You ask a question about the future, let people contribute and then look for themes instead of trying to debate every single idea. If you take those 3 questions into your conversations moving forward, I promise you your management conversations will shift. You will start to see people lean into their ability to be leaders, to make decisions, and to come fully to life, right? We talked about our people, right, in one of the previous workshops being our most important asset, yet why don't we tap into our people in the conversations that we have each and every day? Let me share a couple examples with you, because really as leaders we have a choice. As business owners, as investors, we have a choice in how we move forward and how we look at these 2 shifts that I talked about, the shift in perspective and the shift in approach. The first, which many leaders that come to us want to go through, is their own inner shift. These 2 shifts are new to them. They're like, I don't know if I'm ready to accept this. This is a big leap. Maybe you're not struggling the way I was struggling as a leader, and you think this is good, you think there might be something to it, but you're not sure, right? They go through their own journey to experience appreciative inquiry in how they look at their conversations each and every day. The second is an organization that says, I'm interested, I get the 2 shifts, let's try this out in our next planning conversation. And the third is an organizational shift. Leaders that are ready to take that leap. Leaders that say, heck yeah to those 2 shifts. I see it, I feel it, I want to do it, and I'm going to share with you the results. So the first, the leadership shift. What we really talk about here is the need to understand, then apply, right? Sorry, the need to understand and accept it and then apply it in the real world. So we have a leadership certificate program, the AIMS Leadership Certificate Program, that talks about the skills you need to have as a leader internally and one-to-one and group conversations. We had an organization that wasn't ready to fully jump in and implement AIMS as their management system. So instead they said, well, I'm going to send some leaders through this program. They first sent 4 people. The next cohort, they sent 11. And they sent 11 of their most senior leaders across the organization. Stella Jones is the organization, large company, right? Not normally who we would work with. They sent 11 leaders through the second cohort. And after the second cohort, they said, we need to use this in our big planning conversations, right? We need to, the first one they looked at was safety. And this is just an example from an online workshop we did working with them in partnership where they're implementing AIMS as their management system. They brought different vice presidents, executives from across the company, people that were working in the field, people that were working on the assembly lines, forklift drivers, and talked about safety, right? And in one session, they identified all of the core processes they needed to update. Do you like how I said that? Processes, I'm honoring. I'm Canadian, for those of you who don't know, so usually I say processes, those processes, right? Now they're looking, because they've experienced it, they understood it, they're applying it in certain settings. We just found out actually last night, they're signing up to a long-term partnership. They're like, let's do this. The second example is a planning shift. And here's the thing, in full transparency, not every organization is going to say, I'm ready for this, right? We had a company come to us that was using one of those traditional management systems. And what they found was that they were losing energy to it, right? It was the same thing over and over again. And it was, we come together, we plan, and then we convince. We come together, we plan, and then we convince. And so in a conversation with them, they were talking about their vision. They had to update their 5 and 10-year vision. And we said, what do you think it would look like if we brought everybody into the room? The whole system, the whole company. And they brought 88 people into that conversation. What they originally set as a vision of 250 million with everybody in the room was revised to 500 million. Not only that, with 88 people in the room, they identified how they were going to get there. That company went on to achieve 100% of their goals for the first time ever. The third one, an organizational shift, is when you decide to implement AIMS as your management system, a modern management system that transforms all of the functions of management. Right? We had an organization come to us where they had just acquired a company. It was the CEO, and he had just acquired a company and was struggling to get this company to buy into the systems and structures they needed. This individual knew they needed a management system, but everybody was saying, no, we don't even have meetings right now. You're asking us to do this, and we don't even meet today. So they brought us in. We brought everybody into the room in the company to create the traditional term accountability chart, org chart. We brought everybody into the room to create the org chart and to set priorities for the next 6 months, because it was halfway through the year. Immediately following that one-day session, what happened was everybody in the room said, this is awesome, what's next? They weren't fighting having meetings, they were saying, we want to do more of this. Why? Because they had a say, they could talk about their strengths, they could create an org chart and priorities based on what everybody wanted. Here's the other interesting thing, is the previous owner was in the room. The previous owner was in the room, and after that session, the owner said, I now see my path to leave the business. Because she was able to observe that her team had the answers. Right? We went on to do a strategic planning session where a new employee came into the room, had only been with the company 3 weeks. After the first day, came back the second day and said, I was so excited last night. And we said, why were you so excited? And she said, because I finally found my work's purpose. Just by being in a strategic planning conversation. She finally found her work's purpose. That company partnering with us, where we go in, do their strategic planning, their quarterly planning, we work with them every single week on how they're implementing using appreciative practices. They've gone on to triple their revenue forecasts in just a year and a half. Triple. Right? Not only that, that new employee that came into the room is the one who identified the biggest strategic initiative that company is working on today. Right? We don't know what's possible unless we bring people into the conversations that we're having to transform it. There are some examples from the workshop. Here's my commitment to you. Please, just take those 3 questions, right? Purpose question, strengths question, possibility question. Into the management conversations that you're having, honor what people bring in and just look for the themes. You don't have to debate anybody's ideas. Just honor them, theme them, and let me know what happens, right? If you want to learn more about our leadership certificate program or a planning conversation or working with us, you can email me at jbowman@aims-institute.com. All right, thank you very much. I can open it up to any questions now.
I've got one.
Perfect, thank you.
So, $100 million in new revenue,
Yes.
kind of where in the organization did that come from? Just curious, like where came up with those ideas?
Yes, great question. So what we identified, we brought everybody into the room, and from a business development perspective, we said, this is a fundamentally different goal. And honestly, when the group came up with the original idea, we didn't have the solution, and it scared the crap out of me, right? So we went back to our entire business development engineering team and said, here's the goal. Here's what we have in front of us. And what emerged through that conversation, we really embodied this whole system type approach, was most of the time in the automotive industry, what we do is we wait until the RFQ comes out from the customer. And then we look at that and we design a process to meet that RFQ. And we said, well, here's the thing. We build today wheelhouse assemblies and rail assemblies and these things. And we do it for these vehicles right now. We know based on past history, they don't change that much. So why not start designing the process before the RFQ even comes out? That was number one, the idea to start early. The second idea was, hey, we need to eliminate inefficiency in the process. Why don't we build these assembly lines out of cardboard and actually work parts through the process to eliminate any waste? So by the time the RFQs would come out, we would already have cut 20 to 30% of the waste out of our process, right? And that's what enabled us in all the business that we targeted we wanted to win almost all of it. We went from like a 5% win rate to a 70% win rate. Does that answer your question? Yeah, yeah. Any other questions? Yep.
Can you say? Oh, sure. What growing pains did you have from that 50%? Growing pains, you know, and how did you
I didn't hear
overcome
the start
them?
of it. Can you repeat the start?
So regarding the 50% increase
Yep.
in 1 year, what growing pains did you have from increasing capacity so quickly?
That's a great question. So we knew up front, when the group had identified we need to win $100 million business, the first thing that came out of everybody's mouth is we can't. We don't have space for it. So then we used, remember I talked about the power of the question, we said, let's answer this question then. We can if. Brainstorm ideas. What would enable us to house all of this new business? And through that brainstorming exercise, several people came up with the ideas. Why don't we just eliminate all the warehouses that we have? And so then we dug into the data to say, well, is that even possible? And we figured out it was. We were moving some parts 27 times. And so instead of doing that, we ended up moving them like 3 and 4 times by bringing an expert in to help us with the value chain. Great question. The two went hand in hand together just by changing the question. Instead of saying, no, we aren't going to do that, win the $100 million business, because we don't have space, we said we can if. Any other questions? Is that a question, Scott, or are you just?
Just telling you we got about 5 minutes left. So we
Okay,
got a little,
thank you.
1 or 2 more questions.
Yep, Lee?
Hold on, Lee. If we don't use the mic, they can't hear it on the camera, and it'll deplete the value of your replay quite a bit.
Lord. Does appreciative inquiry as a management style include things like EOS's processes on how to go about conducting meetings, or is it just more in how you're approaching the issue at hand from a question asking standpoint?
It's a great question. So here's what we learned. Number one is there's things in other management systems like EOS, they do really well. And our stance is, if you're currently using EOS as an example and you use the tool Get It, Want It capacity to do it, beautiful, keep using it. It's a great tool, right? We have our own for all the management functions are the same. So every management system you look at will have this tool. You know, the L10 is the EOS meeting. We have our weekly all hands meeting, right? What we've learned, Lee, is just by trying to take what's there, it doesn't necessarily honor the approach. And so we've had to tweak things to really bring out the best of the whole system in the thinking each and every week. So for every management function and the tools and processes, we either have our own that's very similar but elevated, or we honor ones that are out there. Our belief is, you know, that's one of the ones as an example from EOS, 4 disciplines of execution and how do you create focus in an organization in the next year. They've got some great stuff in there, right? And so we work under that methodology. Our strategic planning process uses the SOAR framework. So instead of strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats, we use strengths, opportunities, aspirations, results, and we've got a framework to follow it. So our whole thing is, I joke, is I'm not an innovative person. And someone challenged me, well, you are, because you're putting puzzle pieces together from other things, right? And so we're not creating a lot of new, we're just studying all of the best and trying to honor that in the approach that we take every day.
So I'm really big on systems, and I've heard about 2 systems that I would like to get certifications for.
Yep.
The EOS and the AIMS. Are you going to go ahead and sell that AIMS certification, or would you say both would be something that you should look at for systems?
I mean, depending on the work that you want to do, there's nothing wrong with getting more knowledge from each of the systems. You know, I would encourage you to lean into each of them. From a certification perspective, right now we have the leadership certificate. We are looking at a full certification program, but it's sometime out in the future for us. One of the key things with the AIMS Institute that we pride ourselves on is every single person that you're going to be partnering with is a business owner, is someone who's operating a business, because you know, it's one thing to design and facilitate these powerful conversations. It's another when you understand the complexities of running a business each and every day.
You know, Jeff, just to clarify, just to see if we understood the question, because like EOS, like they're basically their primary business model is certifying people to go facilitate EOS with companies. Like that's how they make most of their money. And what Jeff has done is he's, for companies that want to install AIMS as their operating system, you know, he and his team will do that for an organization. It's a different business model. So when somebody says they want to get, you know, they want to adopt AIMS, do they want to use it as their operating system? You know, there's a solution for that. If you want to learn AIMS so you can go be a facilitator for other people that want to use AIMS, that's not necessarily part of Jeff's business model today. And I don't know if that helped. Yeah, okay.
So and here's the way we think it. TK's got a question here as well. Here's the way that we think about it, right? Is in an organization, if you really want to fully embrace AIMS as your management system, there's two levels. One is at the level of the organization is how do we bring more people into the management conversations, and we're going to increase organizational capacity, right? Because we've got more voices. If you're only tapping into 10%, that's the capacity that you're going to reach. If you tap into 40, 50, 60% and you're constantly bringing different people through those conversations, everybody's learning and growing along with the company. But the other thing is, how are you giving individuals in the organization these skills as well? So every management conversation they're going into, they can apply the same practices, and that's why we have the leadership certificate program. When you combine the two things together, and we have companies that do that, they're like, we want to implement this as our management system, and we're going to send our leaders through the program. You're hitting it from both fronts, and you multiply the capacity of the organization. TK?
Two questions, Jeff. First, what's the optimal size company that this management system is good for?
Yep.
And the second is also, what is the target leadership style? Like, who is most resistant or receptive to? We were just talking about mindset. Like, if you're living in fear, like, I don't want to do it, or, hey, nothing's going to go wrong, let me get the best system. So who's the target?
Great question. So typically we work with organizations 10 to 250 people, but it doesn't mean those are the only organizations. We have clients that are 2,000 employees. We have one client that's 30,000 employees, but it's designed to work with that small to medium-sized business. So great question. Second question I love. So who does this typically work for? Usually there's 2 or 3 categories of people, and this is what we've discovered is, one, if you're stuck, like you're like, I don't know what to do. I'm trying to implement this system, just not getting the results. We're going backwards. Like, I need something different, which was kind of my story, right? The second is, if you've just acquired a new business and you acquired it because you like the industry, you think it's a good model, but you recognize that you don't possibly have the technical know-how to answer all of the questions, and you need to pull that from the people in your organization, right? Those are usually the leaders like, give me a process that pulls those people into this so that I can actually trust and believe and let them go. The third I would put into the category of, you know, forward thinking, ready to embrace a totally different way of leading and operating your business. And that's why, back to the first question, TK, we have some very large organizations that are like, let's do this. But it's the CEO or the CEO saying, I really buy into this. One of the companies that I actually started working with right when I started on my own, the CEO's spouse was a faculty member, I forget what university, but she taught appreciative inquiry. And he was like, the fact that I found you was divine intervention, and they went all in. They're still a client today, right? They're still a client, and this is 5 years later. So great questions. Did that answer it? Yeah. All right. That's all I got. Thank you very much, everybody. I'll be around all day if you have questions.
So Jeff, before I let you leave the stage, I just thank you for that. I hadn't heard the latest sort of breakdown, and I took a bunch of notes, and I'm excited. So well done. Just a small token of appreciation. Your day is just getting started, but this is a good time before I forget. Thank you for that, and appreciate you being here, and fantastic. So we're gonna break here in a minute. I want to give you a couple of quick updates, and just one thing that came to mind. You know, I was reflecting back when I first heard about this appreciative inquiry stuff, like the first thing that flashed through my mind is like, this is just a bunch of touchy-feely, like, you know, we got a business to run here, okay? But then I started looking into it, and you know, David Cooperrider was one of my professors when I got my MBA here in 2001. And I started, you know, reading about what he was doing, and I saw that he was working with the United Nations and, you know, like epic work. He was working with the U.S. Navy, and there were two entrepreneurs, Chuck Fowler from Fairmont Santrol and Bob Stiller from Green Mountain Coffee, which is now known as Keurig, who wrote 8-figure checks to further appreciative inquiry as a result of what it did in transforming their companies, and in both those cases having those companies go from millions of dollars to billions of dollars. That got my attention. And so I started looking into what was going on, and I'm like, how have I not heard about this? And then 2 weeks ago, I was at an alumni event, and Loretta Randolph was getting an award as a distinguished alumni from Weatherhead, and she went through the Masters of Positive Organizational Development program here at Weatherhead, which is where a lot of the appreciative inquiry and a lot of this like cutting edge organizational behavior, change management stuff that'll just blow your mind because it works so good, is taught. And she made a comment that explained all of it to me. She said, you know, the values of Cleveland, in her opinion, are, you know, do everything with excellence, always give back, and don't take yourself too seriously. And I was like, yeah, that really resonates, you know. And David Cooperrider embodies that stuff. He's not a self-promoter. And if you start researching this stuff and you look at what appreciative inquiry has done, it's going to blow your mind, and you're going to wonder why is his name not a familiar, you know, everybody knows his name. Like a Peter Drucker, who's a good friend of David's, by the way. It's because that's his value system, and he's just doing this like world-changing work behind the scenes. So, anyway, thanks, Jeff, for you reminded me of all that stuff as I was listening to what you were doing. Just a quick shout out to all of our sponsors right inside the cover of your workbook. Please check that out. Today wouldn't be possible without their financial support. They also helped us, we sold the event out twice. We sold out like 2 weeks ago, and then we increased the space so we could have more people, and then we sold that out again. We had a bunch of people helping us with that. We've mentioned several times there's an ETA course. All the information about it's on the back cover of the workbook. We're emphasizing it over and over again because this is the group that seems to be most interested in this topic because you invested an entire day to be here. So we want to make sure you have first dibs on that because it's going to fill up, and there's an incredible value for it. So check that out. It's on the back cover. And if you have questions about that, on page 34 of the workbook, you can scan and sign up for a webinar with me and Reed, who's teaching that course. There's one this Friday and one next Wednesday. We'll answer questions about Promise Partners. We'll answer questions about the course or whatever you want to talk about as far as ETA in Cleveland. We're going to break. There's should be food, hopefully, fingers crossed. We'll be back in this room at 12:30 for the afternoon session. And thanks again for being here, and have a great lunch. See you soon.